on behalf of UMWA, it's an honor to have everybody here, our brothers and sisters from the Steelworkers, MSHA, NIOSH, Department of Labor, Madam Secretary. I appreciate everybody's comments. I'm going to introduce our first speaker today, who's actually a coal miner, debilitating. He's been an underground coal miner for 16 years. He works at underground at the Marion County Coal Mine. He's chairman of the safety committee there. Dave does a lot of work for us, not just at the mines, but outside the mines too, whenever we need him. We really appreciate him. With that, I will introduce our first person speaking today, Dave Dayton.
Good morning. I'm not a big public speaker. As a matter of fact, it's the first time I've spoken like this, but I want to present the next, I'm going to be presenting the next speaker, which is the Acting Secretary of the Department of Labor, which is Julie Sue. Julie Sue is one of the most powerful and productive union presidential in the history of things. Like I said, I'm not good at reading the paper off the line. To be honest with you, I'm probably not the best one to do this, but I'm here to do it anyway. So, been a great advocate for unions and for production and safety and the future of our mines and the future of this health and safety for all coal miners. She's worked hard and wants a good job for everybody, to get a good, just day pay for everybody. And she works very hard. Her history is undoubtedly one of the best as far as working for us and with the government. I know she's put in like over 20 years with the government. And she has been an advocate for workers, for the rights, to help all poor and above, and works towards the Asian and American communities to try to help make that sure that we have everything's fair across the board with everybody. I would like, when she first left the government, she always worked and made sure that the voices were always heard in the halls of the power for everybody. You know, I'd like to personally introduce the Labor Acting Secretary, Julie Sue.
Yay.
Much, Dave. Thank you, and thank you for meeting with me beforehand. It's just an honor for me to be here with you and to be introduced by you. So thank you for today, and thank you for your lifetime of work. It is really great to be here in Uniontown. I really want to thank the United Mine Workers of America District 2 for hosting us today. And I actually want to say a couple of things before I talk about the rule itself. I want to say that this rule would not have been possible without miners like Dave, who have told their stories, and unions who have helped to give them a voice. That's all. And I want to acknowledge United Steelworkers President Dave McCall. I want to acknowledge the International Union of Operating Engineers President James Callahan, who are tremendous leaders in the labor movement. And I want to say something about a gentleman who has spent his life's work lifting up, protecting, and advancing the rights of miners. and that is President Cecil Roberts of the United Mine Workers of America. Brother Cecil, you have really paved the path to today. You have been sounding the alarm about occupational illnesses like silicosis, like black lung, for decades. And I am very proud to be here with you today. And of course, I'm also grateful to the building trades, as well as to a couple of friends who are here. I just want to mention them: Darren Kelly, president of the Central Labor Council in Pittsburgh. And I also want to acknowledge our Pennsylvania AFL-CIO president, Angela Ferrito. So thank you both so much for being here and for your leadership. I start by acknowledging union leaders and the important role that they have played, because it gives me a chance to say something that I say all the time, which is that unions make America stronger. And the role of unions not only makes things better for union members, but also for non-union working people who are going to get the protections of this rule as well. So thank you all for all of that. And thank you on behalf of President Biden, who believes this deep in his heart as well. Senators Casey and Fetterman have also been really great partners in this work, especially Senator Casey. We talked about him a little bit this morning also. He's been leading this fight on behalf of the Commonwealth for decades too. And there's so many advocates from the mining community who are here today. I got to speak to some of them, but Gary, Linda, Debbie, Arvin, Billy, John, and Sam, thank you for your work. We do not get to this point without advocacy over a long period of time for many people, many of whom take risks in order to raise their voices. So thank you very, very much. Today, we're making it clear that no job should be a death sentence, that every single worker should come home healthy and safe at the end of the day and at the end of a career. The stories that we're going to hear today from folks like Gary represent just a small fraction of miners who have had their lives upended by silica dust. In Central Appalachia, an estimated 1 in 5 long-tenured coal miners have black lung disease. That's 1 in 5 who struggle to get through a phone call, to play with their grandkids without losing their breaths. That's 1 in 5 whose life expectancy is cut down by an average of 12 years. That's 1 in 5 who are forced to carry an irreversible disease. And the trends are going in the wrong direction. Doctors are diagnosing and treating more miners with black lung and other respiratory diseases than ever before, including at younger and younger ages. And for too long, we've accepted this as just the normal course of things for miners. They've had to work without the same protections from silica dust that people in other industries get, even though we have known about the harms of silica dust since Francis Perkins was the Secretary of Labor. No more, not on our watch. President Biden put this rule on his regulatory agenda from the very beginning. And that's what it looks like to have the most pro-worker, pro-union president in American history. This new rule is going to reduce exposure to toxic silica dust and reduce entirely preventable diseases. I couldn't be prouder of our team's work on this, starting with our Assistant Secretary, Chris Williamson, who you will hear from in a moment, and our entire MSHA team, many of whom are here today. We talked just a little while ago about how important it is to have enforcement on the ground and MSHA responding when we hear about complaints, when you need us. And that MSHA team has stepped up in this moment too. And I just really want to acknowledge the long nights and long months and really years of work that led to this moment. Our final rule brings the permissible exposure limit for miners in line with the limit for workers in other industries. It also includes safeguards for miners' health, like engineering controls and monitoring to prevent overexposure. The final rule requires that metal and non-metal mines also provide periodic health exams at no cost to miners and their families. modeled after the longstanding program that is currently available to coal miners. And we're also strengthening respiratory protection standards against all airborne hazards, not just silica dust. Since I came to the Department of Labor, I have asked my team to unleash their full power for the good of American workers, to use all the tools that we have at our disposal to conduct, not just to do inspections and issue citations, but to make workers truly healthy and safe, and to make sure that workers are truly heard. And today is a product of that. We estimate that this final rule is going to save more than 1,000 lives and prevent severe illnesses for thousands more. This means more moms and dads, more sons and daughters, more grandparents who can play with their kids, who come home healthy and safe, not just at the end of each day, but the end of a career, and including those right here in Uniontown. I know that for the families in this room, especially those who have lost loved ones to illnesses caused by their jobs, that this final rule is a long time coming. And I just want to acknowledge that point too. I'm honored to be here with all of you as we take a long overdue step forward. I just want to say one last thing, which is this rule, as exciting and important as it is, it's just one part of what we are doing to unleash the full power of the Department of Labor to protect America's miners. So much of our work doesn't make the news, but it is making a difference in communities across America like this one. So first, we have built MSHA back up. We've hired 270 inspectors after the devastating cuts of the last administration. And those inspectors are on the job now to enforce the Mine Act, because the law is only as good as it is enforced, and to conduct investigations to keep miners healthy and safe, and will enforce this standard. In addition to our regular inspections across the country, we are conducting monthly impact investigations, impact inspections in higher risk mines to identify and eliminate hazards that can cost miners their lives, right? So often people respond when a tragedy occurs. We are on the job to prevent those tragedies from happening in the first place. We're also educating miners and mine operators about how to prevent accidents through proper training and precautionary measures, including our Take Times, Save Lives campaign. And while any miner death is one too many, this year we are seeing that fatalities are down dramatically. So we are going to continue to keep on doing what we know works and to double down on those efforts. We created a miner safety and health app also. So every day miners can get real-time information on their phones. And we use that to send out targeted safety and health alerts directly to miners. And just last month, we launched a new health resource locator tool that makes it easier for miners to access the healthcare that they need. This administration is deeply committed to this community, to miners, to health and safety, and also to preventing things that are going to cause miners their health and safety. We see you, we hear you, we thank you for all the work that you do, and we have your back, not just today, but every day. So thank you all very much. My partner in this work, the leader of our Mine Safety and Health Administration, Chris Williamson.
That's going to be a tough act to follow. Well, it's good to be back in Uniontown today, surrounded by so many in this room who care deeply about our nation's miners. I spent 7 years of my life just down the road in Morgantown, and I know this area, its people, and how important mining is to the economy and culture is evident with everyone you meet. For generations, the miners of this area have worked hard and made sacrifices, including their health, to build and power our nation. And for that, we can never say thank you enough. Today, miners across this country work to provide the raw materials like coal, iron, aggregates, and trona. Where's Marshall at? Trona, copper, and other commodities that our nation depends on. This administration and the Department of Labor work every day to ensure Americans have good jobs. Mining jobs pay some of the highest wages in many communities, including the one I grew up in. Union contracts provide other benefits, like the UMWA cradle-to-grave health care that took care of my great-grandparents for decades, without any cost, no out-of-pocket cost. Who's ever heard of that, right? That's the type of benefits you get under a UMWA contract. And I've seen it in my own family. But that's not all that goes into a good job. Miners deserve to go home safe and healthy each day, and should never have to choose between sacrificing their lungs and providing for their families. Miners also deserve to retire in dignity and enjoy the fruits of their labor with their loved ones. That's why we're all here today, to take a long overdue step forward to protect miners from exposure to toxic silica dust. I want to acknowledge and thank a few people who we couldn't have finalized this rule without. First, as I said, this was a tough act to follow, but I want to thank our acting secretary, Julie Sue, for her unwavering support of our agency and its mission. Having you here today representing President Biden's pro-worker, pro-union administration, it's not in here, but it means a great deal to me. But it also means a great deal to this mining community, organized labor, and everyone in this room. So thank you. You already mentioned our MSHA employees, and I would be remiss if I didn't spend a little bit of time talking about them too. And so thank you to all the MSHA employees who made this rule possible, some of which are in this room, and many others are still back in Arlington and through many offices all throughout this country, from California to the Northeast. And so specifically, Deputy Assistant Secretary Patricia Sylvie, who's with us here today, Director Romy No, who's here with us today as well. And she's not here with us today, but Associate Solicitor April Nelson, all their teams put in countless late nights and made personal sacrifices because they believe that the nation's miners deserve these health protections. So we owe all the MSHA employees who helped with this rule our gratitude. Public service is a noble calling, and that's why you go into public service, to do things like this, to make real differences in the lives of people. That's not in my speech either, but as a lifelong public servant, I wanted to say that, because public servants don't get the things they often deserve. I also want to thank former Assistant Secretary Joe Main for being here with us today too. And then Dr. Wiseman from NIOSH, I want to say thank you to NIOSH. I know you brought a few folks with you today, and they've been incredible partners on safety and health, but specifically on this rule, and done a lot of research. And we wouldn't be at this point without the work that you and your team have done and will continue to do. And we're going to be working with you on implementation and other issues. So thank you. My first speech as Assistant Secretary was at the UMWA Coastal Convention. President Roberts will remember that. But not quite 2 years ago, they invited me to come out and speak. And I don't know if I'd ever given a speech to that big of an audience before, and it was a little bit daunting. But I shared the story of my great-grandfather, a proud UMWA coal miner for over 30 years, who suffered with black lung disease until the day he died. I spoke about the dangers that miners face being exposed to silica dust, and that I understood the gravity of the problem and the urgency needed to do something about it. I committed to getting a regulation done that would counter occupational plagues like silicosis and black lung disease. And I'm proud to share with you and everyone in the mining community that we've delivered on that promise. I want to talk through some specifics of how this new rule is going to make a real impact. So for starters, these new health protections are for all of the nation's miners: metal, non-metal, and coal. And for workers who do construction and various other types of work on mine sites. Having leadership and representatives from the steel workers and the mine workers here today, all under one roof, underscores the importance of this rule to their members and to all miners. This rule establishes a uniform PEL of 50 micrograms per cubic meter, measured as an 8-hour time-weighted average. It's a mouthful. That will substantially reduce silica exposure for all miners. 50 is what NIOSH has long recommended, and 50 is the level that OSHA requires for other workers. Miners deserve those protections too. I also want to make another point clear about the PEL. Mine operators will be required to always keep silica dust at that level or lower, and not doing so is a violation of the new standard. In other words, there will be consequences for non-compliance, including citations, proposed penalties, immediate corrective actions, and if abatement does not occur in a reasonable period of time, potentially withdrawal orders under Section 104B of the Act. MSHA will use the full suite of enforcement tools that Congress gave us to protect miners, including taking enforcement actions based on a single sample that is above the PEL. Also, the rule and the preamble are clear regarding the hierarchy of controls and the primacy of engineering controls, and that respirators shall not be used to achieve compliance with the PEL. The rule also establishes a 25 microgram per cubic meter action level, which will help operators and miners and their representatives maintain awareness of dust exposure and inform operators' decision-making about engineering controls needed to maintain compliance. Under this new standard, for the first time, all mine operators will be required to conduct their own silica sampling. Exposure monitoring has been strengthened in the final rule by removing the option of using industry-wide objective data or historical operator sampling data. And as it relates to exposure monitoring on the qualitative side, one of the changes from the proposed rule to the final rule is that those qualitative checks are going to be required at least every 6 months, or whenever there's a change in production, processes, installation, maintenance of controls or equipment, or geological conditions. So what's that mean? Anytime there's one of those changes that miners may be exposed at or above the action level of 25, a mine operator will have to sample those miners to see what is the exact exposure there in that situation. And then the other parts of the rule will kick in, and if they're above the PEL, then I have to take immediate corrective action. And if they're between 25 and 50, then they'll just continue to go about. But it's important because it's important to maintain that awareness, because you only know whether or not to take action to prevent miners from exposure if you know what the exposure is in the first place. So that's one of the changes that we made in the final rule that I wanted to share with you all, based on comments that we had heard during the process. Also, any operator sampling that is required under this final rule, and I want to be very clear about this because I think there was a little bit of confusion, so I'm going to be very clear on this point. Any operator sampling that is required under this final rule is in addition to the existing silica sampling that MSHA already conducts. It's not a replacement for, it's in addition to. And as I said a minute ago, for the first time, this rule is going to require operators in addition to MSHA to take silica sampling. The integrity of the entire sampling program is vital to protecting miners' health. And there will be consequences if operators or their agents try to game the system. And we ask miners to report fraud or cheating if they see it. We're also updating MSHA's existing respiratory protection standard to better protect miners exposed to silica and other airborne contaminants like diesel particulate matter. So specific to metal non-metal, this rule creates a medical surveillance program to provide periodic medical examinations at no cost to minors. And that's modeled after the longtime program that Dr. Wiseman oversees in Morgantown and NIOSH oversees that's existed in coal. And we know a lot about what's going on in coal mining because of that program and its existence for years. And then nothing like that has ever existed in metal non-metal mining. So this rule creates and starts that process. This new program will improve early detection of disease. And although silicosis is irreversible, when identified early, it empowers miners and their families so that they can make decisions that could at least slow down the progression of the disease. Under our Miner Health Matters initiative, MSHA will continue to work with NIOSH, health professionals, and others to encourage all miners get screenings and they maintain an awareness about their health. Lastly, I think it's important to note that in addition to strengthening protections for miners in this final rule, many of the core provisions of the proposed rule that are supported by those here today were not changed. So in closing, I want to issue a call to action to everyone in the mining community to work with MSHA to successfully implement this new silica rule. MSHA stands prepared to work with everyone to provide compliance assistance and help reduce miners' exposures. Silicosis and black lung disease are debilitating and deadly, but they are also entirely preventable. It's really important. I want to say that one more time because this is the thing that gets me most about all of this, is that these diseases are entirely preventable. And we should all be able to agree that they should and can become relics of the past. Ultimately, this rule's success will depend on its implementation and enforcement. And as you've already heard from the acting secretary, you could rest assured that this administration has already begun that process and will not hesitate to use all the tools at its disposal to protect miners' health and prevent disease. So I sincerely ask everyone in the mining community to work with us and to live up to what Congress instructed all of us to do, which is to ensure that the first priority and concern must always be the safety and health of the mining industry's most precious resource, the miner. So thank you again to President Roberts. Thank you to everyone here in District 2 that have been couldn't have asked for better hosts and for hosting us here today. And I'm proud, and it's a special day for me to be here with you all. Thank you. And with that, I have the pleasure of inviting up to talk a little bit from the steelworkers' perspective, and really appreciate you coming down and being with us, Vice President Kevin Mack.
Okay, I want to start here. Good morning from the United Steelworkers International Executive Board on this great day. Good morning. My name is Kevin Mapp, and I serve as the International Vice President of Human Affairs for the United Steelworkers Union. On behalf of our 850,000 members nationwide, I first want to thank the Biden administration for taking this much needed action to protect miners from the dangers associated with silica exposure. I also wish to express our deep appreciation to the Department of Labor, MSHA, especially Acting Secretary Julie Sue and Assistant Secretary Chris Williamson, for the countless hours of work that went into crafting, revising, and finalizing this critical rule. And lastly, I want to thank our union siblings, the United Mine Workers of America, for hosting this historic event today. Thank you. The USW is one of the largest mining unions in the country, representing miners in the US and Canada, particularly in metal and non-metal settings. Our union has a deep understanding of the tragic and even lethal consequences of silica exposure. Miners' health and well-being. As such, we strongly supported OSHA updating its silica standard back in 2016. And we now commend MSHA for doing the same. Many threats are present in all mining settings. For example, the dangerous connection between silica and lung cancer is a troubling reality that affects every miner. In light of this evidence, workers need the federal government to take action on their behalf, and MSHA's final rule has done just that. Thank you. Lowering both the permissible and exposure limit and the action limit will directly reduce the risk that miners face. In addition, other important aspects of the rule will all go a long way in ensuring that miners are as protected as possible while on the job. In closing, I want to thank the Biden administration, the Department of Labor in particular, for all the work that went into this rule. Federal policy can often have broad, indirect effects that can be hard to measure. However, that is not the case here today. This final rule will literally save lives. Thank you.
How you gonna do this again? Like I said, good morning. But yeah, this ruling, to be honest with you, is long overdue. It's something that the mining industry has needed for years. I'm glad to see it. As being an active underground coal miner, I've done many jobs underground, from roof bolting to running supply motors across the mines to dragging a drill into the seal lines. So I've fought a lot of times, but as a safety committeeman, we really appreciate, and it's our job to keep miners safe and try to help keep them out of harm's way, such as keeping them in good air is one of our pet peeves. We've seen a lot. We fought with the company a lot of times. The company was never going to do this on their own to begin with. None of these mining companies were. You know, we fought with them over just putting cans on drills out by or keep people downwind of dust and or rock dusting and stuff, so forth. So without this ruling, I really appreciate and proud that MSHA has taken a stance on this. This is something that's just not going to help coal miners. It's going to help all miners across this country. With all that, I'd like to say I know personally I've watched what passing away when you can't breathe and how it struggles and how it's a miserable, long death. I don't want anybody's family to ever have to experience that again in the future. It's something that's horrible and it's horrendous to have to watch. So I appreciate all MSHA's what they've done as far as with this ruling, because it's going to make a difference. With all that said, let's see who's next on the. Oh, here. Okay.
Marshall can tell us a little bit about what it's like being
Yeah.
a safety committee member on the Metal side, right?
Yep.
Good morning. My name is Marshall Cummings. I'm a member of United Steelworkers Local 13214. I want to start by thanking the Department of Labor under the Biden administration and MSHA in particular for taking this historic action. I also want to specifically thank Acting Secretary Julie Sue and Assistant Secretary Chris Williamson for being here today. Thank you. I've worked in Shona Mines in Southwest Wyoming for 18 years. At my local, I'm a chief steward, a safety committeeman, and a miners rep. My most important titles, however, are husband and father. It is with those titles in mind that I want to express my deep gratitude to MSHA for finalizing this essential health and safety rule. I'm a third-generation miner, and my first day of work in a Toronto mine was 5 days before I walked for graduation at high school. I worked at my current employer for 14 years, 2 years underground, 12 years on the surface. I was first notified that I was overexposed to silica in 2011. I never heard of a level of exposure, nor am I aware of any practice that is limiting exposures to this day. Since we're a metal, non-metal mine, we do not have the same standards as coal. Once I became aware of the dangers of silica exposure, I tried to go through the proper channels within my company. First, I expressed my concern with my immediate manager, then went up the corporate ladder to try and raise awareness about this issue and call on the company to mitigate exposures. However, despite building a presentation on the hazards of respirable silica, the company failed to take any meaningful steps to address these dangers until the initial rumors and rumblings of this implementation of the new standards begun. Instead, our union, with the help of Dr. Jeremy Waugh from the National Jewish Health, took matters into our own hands by educating our members about the risks of exposure. Our union put on a sticker campaign, which is in the back. We laid some out on the table that was only introduced through the safety program with the steelworkers. I handed out over 1,400 stickers, but unfortunately that campaign did not solve any issues, nor brought about significant improvement in the mine. My story is one of countless examples of how metal, non-metal mining companies will react, or more accurately, not react, to the concerns about silica exposure without a robust federal standard. The first line in the Miners Act of 1977 states that the first priority and concern of all in the coal or other mining industry must be the health and safety of its most precious resource, the miner. That's me. No longer will a favorable quarterly report to a company's board come before the long-term respiratory health of a miner. In my testimony before the board, I spoke of how how much work the steelworkers have put into fighting this killer dust. 13 years for me and many more from the miners that came before me. I testified that with the stroke of a pen, MSHA could achieve what we fought for over decades to try and ensure. Today, Assistant Secretary Williamson and Acting Secretary Julie Sue are doing just that. All miners cannot thank you enough. At the beginning of my remarks, I wanted to establish my credibility by listing my titles, and I ended with my most important ones being husband and father. The proudest moments of my life have been spent with my family, whether at home after a long day of work or watching my oldest son playing his first football game last fall. These are the best parts of life, but I worry with my exposure in the mines, they may have already taken away from my health later in life. Silica can cause silicosis in a matter of days. It is a carcinogen. Silica is a silent and invisible killer, and we need a robust federal regulation to ensure our safety when companies refuse. In closing, I want to thank President McCall, Steve Solomon, Tris Creech, Will Wilkinson, Andy Martinez, my wife Rachel, and my children for encouraging me to work on this important issue. In the labor movement, we empower each other to stand up against the giant that is corporate America. Without these people empowering me, I never would have been able to take the stand I did for the long-term health of all miners. I would like to thank MSHA for issuing this final rule. Every parent wants better for their children, and it's my hope that with the strong provisions in this final rule, this will protect the health of all miners for generations to come. We can continue to do our jobs safely, and we will continue in our most important roles as fathers, husbands, brothers, sisters, mothers, and wives. Thank you for your time.
Morning. My name is Amar Pandya. I'm a Senior Policy Advisor at MSHA in the Office of the Assistant Secretary. Thank you, Marshall. When you talked about, shone a light on the importance of this rule protecting all miners, both coal and metal, non-metal. And I think that's a good segue into our next speaker, Dr. David Weissman, the Director of the Division of Respiratory Disease Studies at NIOSH. That's the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. Their division provides national and international leadership for prevention of work-related respiratory illness, injury, and death. And as our Assistant Secretary talked about, NIOSH closely worked with our staff, was very gracious, their time and expertise. And a lot of the statistics, such as things with long-tenured coal miners or, unfortunately, the increased prevalence of progressive massive fibrosis have come from folks in this room, NIOSH researchers. So with that, please welcome Dr. David Weissman.
Thank you, Amar. And I'd like to thank MSHA for inviting NIOSH to speak at this ceremony announcing the new respirable crystalline rule. It's an honor to be able to say a few words on behalf of NIOSH. Most importantly, we want to congratulate the Department of Labor, Acting Secretary Sue, and MSHA Director Chris Williamson, and the entire MSHA team for their outstanding efforts to finalize the rule. It was a huge effort. We know that because we saw all the work that went into it, but it was well worth it. We at NIOSH and many in this room have seen the terrible human cost when minors are exposed to respirable crystalline silica. NIOSH has posted a video on our website called The Faces of Black Lung 2. When you watch it, you'll see minors struggling with severe shortness of breath and unable to carry out the kinds of activities that most of us take for granted. The new rule will provide minors with protections that are similar to those already provided to workers in other areas, for example, in construction or in general industry. And if those minors that are in the Faces of Black Lung 2 had been provided those protections, the protections that will be required under this rule, their disease might have been prevented. This is a preventable disease. The mining industry is really critical to our nation, and it's an engine of prosperity for many. A career in the industry provides miners with the income they need to take care of their families, to put their kids through school, and have comfortable retirements. By implementing practical, common sense, science-based protections for miners, this rule is going to be good for miners, and it'll be good for the mining industry too. It'll help miners to remain healthy across their entire careers, and then when they're done, to be able to enjoy healthy retirements. I'd like to call out one new aspect of the rule. Chris had asked me to speak about surveillance. And this rule provides metal and non-metal miners with the opportunity to have periodic health screening with chest x-rays and a lung function test called spirometry over the course of their careers. Those who take advantage of this opportunity will be provided with information that they and their healthcare providers can use to maintain good health. We hope that these tests will be normal for everyone and that miners will be reassured if they have normal testing that they're doing well. But if medical findings do show evidence of disease, miners and their healthcare providers will be able to take steps to improve their health outcomes. Also, NIOSH is going to work with MSHA to track the results of health screening over time so that we'll know at the population level if our nation's miners are being protected or if there's more that needs to be done even beyond what we're already doing. So I'd like to finish up just once again by congratulating MSHA and everyone who worked on the rule. It's truly a great accomplishment that's going to benefit miners, the industry, and our entire nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Weissman. I have the pleasure of introducing Gary Harrison, the president of the National Black Lung Association. Gary spent 3 decades working in coal mines, as Black lung himself, a very inspiring speaker. And as the acting secretary said, him and many of the advocates in this room have worked tirelessly to make this day a reality.
My name is Gary Harrison. I'm the president of the National Black Lung Association, also Fayette County Black Lung Association. I appreciate what's been done for us. I know if it weren't for them, and I wouldn't be standing here right now. Like I said, we've been fighting for years. Thanking Joe Maine. So when we got the standard for black lung down to 1%, I think it was John. If it wasn't for him and y'all, we wouldn't have got that. So we really appreciate what y'all doing. And most of all, I want to thank the UMWA for, if it weren't for them, we would have a hard time getting the government to know what we're going through. They up there every day letting them know about what we're going through. And like I say, if we didn't have Ben, we would really be hurting. See, 'cause we was going up there to Washington, but we weren't going up there but every year or so. And it was costing them that they got to hear what we were going through, what we need. And I can't thank y'all enough for getting this standard. But if we wouldn't have got this silica standard, we will still be fighting. I was 48 years old when I had come out. I don't want to see nobody in this kind of shape. They ain't got no, can't hardly breathe, can't hardly do nothing. Every time you turn around, you got to stop and stand. You just can't run up and down steps. I run up the step the other day because the phone was ringing. And when I got there, they said, "Why are you breathing so hard?" And I tell you, I don't want to see no young people to get this disease. And I want to thank y'all for what y'all doing and how y'all doing it, how y'all changing our circumstances, our situation. If it wasn't for y'all and all the other coal matters, I heard voices of what we're going through, and we need y'all voices. We need y'all to keep speaking up. And thank y'all. And I want to let you know about all the Black Lung clinics. If it wasn't for our Black Lung clinics, we would be hurt. Because they go up to Washington every year and they mention to the everybody up in Washington, they tell us about what we going through. They speak up for us, so we need them clinics. I'm praying that the other guys that ain't got clinics, they can have clinics to speak up for them and let them know what somebody else is going through. I know that my brother right here, he said they just get ready to start something. Just think if they had that years ago, they would know about silica. They would know about what they're going through. We need something that help us what we're going through, that somebody can help us, and y'all doing what we going through. Y'all helping us. And I'm lucky. It took years to get here. But I tell you, we here and we thank you for it.
So I get to have the honor to introduce our final speaker today. Who's going to get the closing remarks. We've heard from all of our friends today, and I think everybody's done a great job. But I want to introduce a gentleman who gave his whole life to fighting for coal miners, fighting for working people, and who not only has done a lot to help this rule go forward, several rules in the past to go forward, and we all owe him a lot of gratitude for that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce President Cecil Roberts.
Well, thank you very much. Now that's Josh Roberts. That's not my son, not my nephew, not my grandson. We're not really related, but I wish we were. Give Josh a round of applause. Today, I think I need to do a number of thank yous, if you don't mind. This event just didn't happen this morning. We have two secretaries in this building, and I walked by them coming in here, and I stopped. I said, "You two are going to be the happiest two people in Pennsylvania when we're all gone from here." So let's give those two wonderful people a round. young lady here is the editor of the United Mine Workers Journal. We have one of our communications folks, probably the communication person, period, from our building. Erin is here somewhere, and she's met many of you. We have staff from both District 2 and Region 1. We have the Vice President, Michael Payton, right here. We call him Biggin, and you can take a look. Chuck Neisel, who is the Vice President of District 2's mother had surgery in South Carolina. And every coal miner out there is a mama's boy. And he went to help her recuperate. And he's had a rough 2 weeks right here in this area fighting to keep some workers busy here. I won't say anything else about that. Our brothers and sisters from the labor movement that's here, we're all one. We wear a shirt that says "We are one" on the front of it, and it says on the back of it, "We're everywhere." And quite frankly, a number of our opposition in the past few years believe that. We've been to St. Louis, Charleston, Columbus, Ohio. We've been to Kentucky in a couple of different locations. We've been to Washington, D.C., fighting for pensions and health care. And these retirees pulled off a miracle. And Congress passed in 2019 legislation to guarantee the lifetime pensions for our retirees and lifetime health care. And we deserved it, we earned it, and we got it. So thank you. Now, I want to just do one thing that we should be clear about. Julie Sue, people call her acting, I don't. She should have been confirmed a long time ago. Our union made a mistake. I'm going to take my pen and scratch acting off this. No UMWA member should ever call her acting again. Nobody in labor should, because she's our friend. And let me tell you, there's an old labor song that I think brings us to this point that we should make clear. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? I want you to know the secretary and the assistant secretary with us today, they're on our side, and we should make no bones about it. To give them another standing ovation. And although I'm the last speaker, I'll try to get us pointed in the right direction. I understand that you two are going to make yourselves available for the press if they want to ask you some questions at the end of this. And I want to thank all my brothers and sisters who are here once again from other unions. That's what being in the labor movement's about. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? We are stronger together when we fight together, and we've experienced that. But I want to teach a little history here today, if you don't mind. And the teachers union are probably going to get upset with a guy like me using that term, teaching. But if I ask you today, where did the first labor secretary come from? He was a coal miner named Williamson. He not only was the first Secretary of Labor, he served 3 terms in Congress, and he was at the inaugural convention in 1890 in Columbus, Ohio. 3 terms in Congress, first Secretary of Labor. And let me tell you what we can do if we want to. We can put more union members in powerful positions in this country, and that will solve a lot of our problems. I wanted to do something. Sometimes we forget about those who went before us and who started this fight. Not far from right here, in 1968, an explosion took place in Farmington, West Virginia, that ignited more than that mine. It created a movement. It created a movement within our union. It created a movement throughout the United States. It eventually gave workers in the mines something they never had before. When that mine exploded, just like that, 78 people were dead. The mine continued to explode over and over and over again. So what was the difference? This had happened numerous times in this country, and quite frankly, no one ever did anything about it. We never had legislation that protected coal miners underground. No federal law that said you can go to, you be fine. We can shut the mines in. Nothing like that existed in 1968. But what was the difference? The difference was television. People in California turned their televisions on and said, my God, what's going on in West Virginia? Look at all those widows. Look at all those kids left behind. Then pressure from those widows, from the community. Here comes the guy that had my job. He just wasn't quite for the workers. Flew down here with a flower in his lapel. And his name was Tony Boyle. He walked up to a mic like this with all the press in America watching. And he praised the coal company for their wonderful safety record. That lit a fire in our union. It created the first Black Lung Association. It was not only the Black Lung Association trying to tell people in this country there's something causing people to die. Let me tell you something. The coal companies said there was no such thing as black lung. Nothing. All these doctors, only a handful of them, quite frankly, were brave enough to step out there. They're lying to you. They're communists. They're radicals. They're trying to shut the coal industry down. Them people, like Dr. Rasmussen, I.E. Buff, Jacques Jablonski, Arnold Miller. What was the significance of Jacques Jablonski? Jacques Jablonski had been on the payroll of the International Union for years. But he decided it was time for change in our union. He ran against Tony Boyle, and not far from here, he was murdered. Not just him, his wife, and his daughter. That was a corrupt period of time in our union. A representative of the Black Lung Movement, Arnold Miller, one of my predecessors, created what was known as Miners for Democracy. And ever since Miners for Democracy, our union elects everybody. We elect the janitor in the local hall, the doorman, everybody who gets to run for office. My job, you have to run, and everybody's got to vote now. But it took people dying for that. And let me explain something to you. It was the Black Lung Movement that went to Congress. It was the widows who went to Congress. So what does that tell you? You can't depend on just one or two people to be engaged in these fights. We wouldn't have pensions guaranteed to us right now, or health care right now, if 10,000 people didn't continue to show up in St. Louis, 13,000 in Columbus, Ohio, 10,000 in the streets of Charleston, West Virginia. And now the Supreme Court of the United States says you can't have these massive demonstrations in 3 states. Let me tell you something, brothers and sisters. We cannot let that happen, because that's the strength of the labor movement. That's the strength given to working people, the average person, to stand up together and collectively and fight back. Today we get a new rule. What does this rule do? It's not overly complicated. More people will be alive 10 years from now than they would have been if it wasn't for what we've done fighting for this rule. We were on the right side of this. We were doing the Lord's work here. It won't be 5 minutes. 5 minutes after we leave here. As soon as the press put this out, that somebody in the coal industry is going to say Cecil Roberts and the Biden administration is trying to shut the coal industry down. No, we're trying to save people's lives. They said the same thing with the 69 Act, and nobody lost their job. There's never too much health and safety in these nation's coal mines. And what we need is more jobs in Appalachia, so people don't necessarily have to find themselves in a non-union coal mine with no representation. Where is this a problem? Southern West Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, and Southwestern Virginia. Draw a radius of 50 miles and you'll find where this problem is. How did we know this was a problem? The clinics in the coal fields, they call themselves the black lung clinics. That's how we first learned of this. Young men walking in and can't get their breath. And they are examined, and it's determined that they've got silicosis. They got the most severe form of black lung. And if you get this, how long do you live? Generally on average, 3 years. 3 years. What's the cure for this? There is no cure but one thing. A lung transplant. That's the only thing that will save you and allow you to go on with your life. This rule will eliminate that if it's enforced the way it needs to be, and I have confidence with this administration, these people here, that's going to happen. So as you come here today, it's not just nice news. To me, this is people going to be alive 10 years from now. That 30-year-old working in a mine that high, you want to know how this is happening? All of the coal in those areas have been mined for 100 years. The coal in those areas are that high to start with. Now the coal itself is that high. So what do? They have to cut the rock away with the coal. Get rid of the rock, take the coal out. But when that continuous miner's doing this, it's knocking that rock 8 inches, 10 inches thick away. It creates dust. When that dust is mingled with coal dust, it's deadly. It's deadly. And you can't say, well, I'm 30 and I won't get it. I don't care if you're 18 or 50, you're going to get it. So this rule, when it's enforced, will save those lives. And I'm not ashamed to say we've been for this rule. We've advocated for this rule. And anytime there's a way to make the mines safer, the United Mine Workers of America is going to be fighting that fight. We don't care who doesn't like it. We're going to fight that fight because coal miners have every right to expect when they kiss their wife goodbye that their wife's going to see them in the morning, just like anybody else. We're just as good as that banker, as that stockholder, that shareholder, as any millionaire in this country. And don't anybody forget it. Thank you and God bless you. While you're up, I want to point out something to you. By the way, Joe, it's great to see you. Joe May and I have been together for 150 years. While you're up, there's somewhere around 150,000 people who have succumbed to this disease. There's various opinions of how many people it is. I saw one statistics has been 100,000 died since 1969. And think about this, there was no law prior to 1969. So it wouldn't be unusual for me to believe that it's more than closer to 200,000 than 150 or 60,000. We should remember those people who passed on. And I want to mention one more name. The president of my local before I got there was a fellow named Charles Brooks. I want you to think about this. African American, we honored him at the Black Lung Association 1 year down at the Southern West Virginia. Charles mortgaged his house. He was a coal miner. He mortgaged his house to start the Black Lung movement. Now, when you leave here today and you're driving home, say, "But I mortgaged my house to have an association that later on helped people." He was a special human being, and he's not with us any longer. Dr. Rasmussen's not with us any longer. Dr. Buss not with us anymore, Arnold Miller's not, none of these people I mentioned. Can we just have a moment of silence for all of those who passed away, either fighting for justice or dying in the battle? Thank you.
What? No, I was waiting from you that you stopped the phone call. Somebody else to stop it. Yeah. No, I don't know.